This agenda would be impossibly difficult if the special interest extremists were as powerful as they are in the United States. It's impossibly difficult in the United States, but it can happen here. And this difference also manifests, I want to say, an important potential. Important that you recognize how much what you do affects us, or us, in the United States. Because against the power of government corrupted, we need balanced, sensible alternatives. And we need you to resist our extremism. You did a little in the most recent Copyright Infringing File Sharing Amendment Act of 2011, not enough. And you must do more if our corruption is not to be exported here. I saw the product of that export at an event in France the end of May, the EG8 conference, where Sarkozy decided he wanted to know what the future of the internet would be. And he engaged in that activity with the same corrupted frame that we understand in the United States again and again. He gathered the richest, most powerful companies from the internet together in Paris and said to them, what's the future going to be? Not even recognizing the future was not there in Paris. The present was there. And what the richest of the present do is they protect themselves against the future. To protect the future, Sarkozy, you need to protect what Tocqueville taught us. You need to protect the equality that produces the sense of entitlement and insight and freedom that the internet has given us. And to resolve the inevitable policy problems, we have to churn those problems through democracies that are not corrupt. Help us. Teach us. Shame us to become something more. But until we do, protect yourself from us. Thank you very much.
That was remarkable, Lawrence. Now, you're going to be taking part in some panel discussions later, so there will be a chance to put questions to you, and I'm just thinking we do, in fact, have time now. We've got 10 minutes now for some questions on that address. We have some roaming microphones. Are they ready to go? So I will moderate that. Put your hand up and a microphone will come to you. Make sure it's turned on before you ask the question. Isn't it nice to have someone talk about your country in positive terms?
Professor Lessig, thank you very much for being here. I'm sure everybody here can agree that your views are highly valued by all. In your opinion, what can we do to keep our governments accountable when they engage in activities like, secret deals with regards to ACTA and the TPPA? And we protest and we rail against this, but there seems to be largely, they're turning their view towards what we're saying and carrying on and engaging in dirty tricks like you highlighted.
Yeah, so I think we need to recognize how incredibly difficult this trade-off is for the government. The government sits down and looks at a trading partner, the United States, the most important trading partner they have, who says, you're going to agree to the following things if you're going to have trade with us. And they do the numbers, and it turns out the things they have to agree to cost them less than the benefit they get from the trading. So they agree to them. Australia did that years ago. This issue was presented to Australia. Australia thought that these copyright things were ridiculous, but they thought, okay, ridiculous, what can we do? That's the terms on which we can trade with the United States. Obviously, trading with the United States is extremely important. So I don't question that it's hard to do the right thing here, and trade is essential, especially for the poor in an economy. So it's essential to make the economy flourish. But I think that there's an obligation that goes with cheating. If you cheat, you have to, on the other hand, make penance for it. And what does penance here mean? It means getting together with other like-minded, rational, sensible democracies and beginning to articulate clearly and firmly why this extremism makes no sense. And to begin to join with, for example, the developing nations in the white belt context who are increasingly pushing a much more balanced, sensible IP regime. And to make it clear to the world that when you talk about balance in the context of intellectual property, you're not saying abolish copyright. I have friends, of course, you can read them on the Twitter stream, I guarantee you after this talk, who will talk about how I am outrageous because I am still not a copyright abolitionist. I am not an abolitionist. I believe in copyright. It's an essential part of the creative industries and the creative culture. I believe in that. But it is a crazy system right now, and it needs to be reformed. And we need to have sensible policymakers who push for that reform so that we can isolate the extremists on both sides. The IP extremists of Hollywood and the copyright abolitionists too. Both of them are motivated for good reasons, I believe, but both of them are wrong. And we need to find sensible positions and push it. And that's the duty of a country that is forced to sign an agreement that they believe is wrong. Sign the agreement, do good to your people, but start pushing hard so that we get away from this craziness in the future.
More questions? We've got time for some more.
I'm a law professor, so I do cold calling too.
Just put your hand up, a microphone will come to you. Oh. I got a question for you.
You've got
one here? Yeah.
Thank you. I won't stand. I just saw back. I've been sitting at too many conferences this week. Thank you for your talk. I guess my question is, you talked about in the beginning about outsiders being necessary for innovation. But to be an outsider, you need to be able to rally against something. So, like major labels, dodgy governments and so on, necessary for the kind of innovation that we enjoy these days.
Yeah, so I used to do a lot of work about post-Soviet countries, and the thing I loved the most about the post-Soviet poets was their depression, because they said, when we lived in the Soviet Union, we could be creative because we had all these rules that we had. But now we live in a world of freedom, and how can you be creative in a world of freedom where you can say whatever you want? Maybe there's some kinds of creativity that requires the man on the other side, but not all. These guys who built, Netscape or Twitter or Facebook or Google, they just had a great idea. And the critical freedom that they had was that they didn't have to convince anybody else that their idea was great before they were allowed to deploy it. And then we, users of the net, could agree, this is a great idea, and we adopted it. Because if they had to convince, the owners of AT&T's networks or Comcast networks or Microsoft before they deployed this technology, they never would have gotten out of the door. That's the essential freedom. Not so much that, you're motivated to try to kill somebody on the other side. Sometimes, not so interesting. It's more, I have a great idea, I want to get it out there and allow people to use it. And it's that sense of outsider that I think is critical. Yes?
Is access to the internet in itself a measure of, or can be a creator of inequality, or not having access to the internet?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So access is a dimension of equality, not in the sense that I think Tocqueville was talking about, but in the sense we usually mean, that is critically important. And when you have radically different access, you produce a society which is radically unfair. In the United States, you can't believe how bad the broadband policy is, but here's a little bit more of just how bad it is. In North Carolina, which is the worst broadband state, some of the local communities, recognizing they had the worst broadband of any state in the union, started building their own networks. Like they just, bought access to a fiber line and just laid fiber to the homes and started offering 100 megabit service at the same price that France offers it. It was amazing. The local monopolies went to the legislature and got the legislature to pass a law banning communities from providing fast, cheap internet to their citizens, right? And I think the best way to understand what's wrong with that is that you're saying to the North Carolina citizens, you are not allowed to enter the 21st century on the same terms as France. I'm sorry to pick on France so much, but I can't resist it after the Sarkozy conference. But as the rest of the world. And that is a deep injustice of inequality in exactly that sense. Access is a minimum. But even with pretty crappy access, as most of the Middle East had, they're able to form revolutions, right? So once you get over a minimal point, it gives people the taste of what's possible. And it's that taste which motivates the innovation and reform and revolution that we saw.
Hey, Lawrence. It's wonderful you want us to help you, but maybe we'd like you to help us. What do you see as our 1, 2, or 3 for New Zealand, our top scariest things that we may get wrong in the coming year or two?
You know, I don't think I know enough to say to that question what the right completely. You know, I would say I was disappointed with the embrace of what is essentially the 3 strikes provision, but I was encouraged by the fact that the cutoff notice, which is of course part of the 3 strikes architecture in New Zealand, is delayed for at least 2 years, so you can study whether the more moderate graduated response by ISPs is a better system. And I think the most important thing is that process of evaluating be honest and have integrity to it, which again, you know, in the United States, I would say it's not possible to imagine it honest and with integrity. But here, I think it is possible to imagine it being engaged in with honest integrity. I think you've demonstrated you have the government infrastructure to support that. Again, you might not like the current government, you might not like the last government, but you got to rise above that a little bit to recognize just what you've got. So I think making that process honest and answering the question honestly about whether this is in fact enough or too much or would be extraordinarily important. Continuing to push the innovation necessary to bring you into the broadband 21st century is also really important. I mean, you know, this country has enormous potential. You're at the edge of the world. The only way to get away from being at the edge of the world is to actually have fast, cheap access. You know, and the kind of architecture of capped data access is terrible, right? I mean, I experienced, I experience it even in, you know, a high-class hotel here. So check in, I turn on my machine, I'm told I have 100 megabits. I don't know what 100 megabits means for internet connectivity. I just check my email. 69 megabits have been used just checking my email, right? So, and then I started thinking, well, okay, I'm not going to go look at, you know, this thing on YouTube, and I'm not going to go sitting there and surfing in 1,000 different ways. I'm going to make all sorts of decisions that restrict the way in which I get access to the network. And also here, of course, your ability to upload to this network has been stifled by the architecture and the way in which it's been deployed. You've got to push towards the sensible position that says we need the same kind of access that Korea and Japan and France and Britain and Germany have. There's no reason New Zealand is different from those countries. Of course, it's going to require 1 or 2 new fiber connections to the mainlands. I understand those things are being rolled, but it's more than that. So pushing there, those are 2 areas that I think you could make enormous progress if you got right.
Now, Lawrence, sorry, we're out of time for you, but I do have here for you now that I've remembered to get it out, a gift. And you will be taking part in other sessions throughout the course of the day. So thank you very
much. Thank you.
All right, what a start to the day.